Good noon, everyone. It's technically afternoon now. It's 1 minute past noon. Welcome to this month's Tuesday talk. This is a really exciting one because this is going to be related to some stuff we just put out on display. What was that? Like, it feels like it was a year ago. It was like 2 months ago.
August.
Maybe less. Yeah. Carrie Blough, who's a registrar in the building and a curator, she's going to be talking about American-made stoneware that we have in the collection. There's some incredible pieces ranging from pretty much all over the United States. We got any West Coasters in the presentation?
No
West Coasters.
Not yet.
Next time.
Yeah.
So check in for that. So thank you for joining. Afterwards, there will be a Q&A, and we'll let you know about some other things coming up at the museum. But let's just get started.
Sounds good. Hello, everyone, both here and beyond. Thank you for attending. I've been really looking forward to talking about this collection for, quite a while here. But only as of this past spring did I become curator of this collection here at the DAR Museum. I've studied American-made stoneware and earthenware and redware throughout my career. In graduate school, I wrote my master's thesis on it, and at every museum I worked at prior to here, I worked with these types of collections. So even while I was here, I continued to research them. I just wasn't the curator of these things. So I was very excited at this opportunity that happened in the spring, and I'm really excited now to finally re-examine these objects in the museum's collection and give them the attention they deserve. So today I'm just going to give you a basic overview of what we have in the museum's collection. I'm not going to go into details about any particular object. I mean, a few at the end, of course, dates and things like that. But I just want to give you a summary of what I found while I was researching this new collection to me. Slide 2, please. So when I say earthenware, I mean red earthenware, also called redware, which is this beautiful ring flask up here, probably made in Pennsylvania between 1790 and 1820. And then this jar that was made in Greensboro, PA in the late 19th century. That is earthenware, stoneware. So that's redware and that's stoneware. Today we're talking about stoneware only. So the blue and gray stuff, that's what we're talking about today. Although by the end of this, you'll see that there are many more color combinations that can be found. So when I was given this collection, I immediately went to work cataloging it because there wasn't a lot of information about these objects, just a handful of them in the collection. And so I started working on all 49 pieces that we have. And at the end, I invite you who are here up to come and look at these books. These are some of the books I use as a resource to find out what I can about some of these objects. And so I already had a list of makers and forms that I knew we had here as I'd been looking at it through the years. And I made a new list of what I wanted to acquire for my collecting plan. And so it was just these years that I've been here, which is now 9, that I've been looking at it and looking at what we had to get a better idea of what we needed to get here. So now it was time to flesh it all out, and I was ready to re-examine this collection as a whole officially and elevate these pieces that had not been focused on in the past. Next slide. So this also coincided with another rare moment for me here. I got to, for the first time, and I hope not the last, I got to use this big case in the study gallery, and I got to put out a lot of the stoneware that we have. And I just thought I want to do it as simply as possible, and I can't thank Leo enough for helping me arrange this. He's so good at arranging things. This is exactly what I had in mind. I wanted it arranged geographically. So we have stoneware from Massachusetts all the way down through the Mid-Atlantic and the East, through the southern states into Texas, which is really cool. I had never really studied Texas pottery, so I was very glad at this opportunity. So as some of you may know, we have a rule in the museum. If something is on display, then it has to be web ready and be available to be accessed in our online database. So that's what I had to do right away for these 49 objects. And next slide. So this is our catalog worksheet in our database, Proficio Rediscovery. We use this. And so this is where I fill in all the fields, what's what, where it was made, the information that's known. We don't always know all of the information, the dates, and especially with stoneware, dating it can be difficult because it all looks the same in some respects, or where it was made. So this is where we fill it in, and I can fill in the provenance narrative. And that's the history of this particular object, not the history of all stoneware, just the history of that one, where it was used, when, by whom, that sort of thing. And so the first step in doing all of this was to photograph everything. I thought that made the most sense, because when I was photographing it all, I could measure it, I could mark the condition, I could note the decoration, the size, all that kind of stuff. So only a few had acceptable photos here, so that was my first step. So now we're going to look at some more pieces. And as I said, I approached this geographically, but I want to say that examining this collection as a whole, as a group, was just fantastic, because I got to see the patterns and the differences in clay color as you come down the coast and all the way to Texas. And that's just really interesting. And the differences in styles and techniques and how they transfer as the country grows older. So we have been collecting stoneware for over 100 years here, which is really amazing. We have some remarkable pieces in the collection, and we're going to see those today. And they've mostly been donated to the DAR Museum. However, 6 pieces were purchased, and I'll point those out as we go along. Next slide. Now, Kevin mentioned I'm also the registrar here. So I'm very much a stickler for calling things by their proper names and by classifying them. Because if you're all talking about the same thing, almost everything before I got to it was called a crock. We actually only have 1 crock in the collection. They're mostly jars. So giving it its proper name, then we all know that we're talking about the same thing. And I use guides like this in some of my books to make sure I'm using the proper names. And then properly categorizing things is very important also, because that tells us what its function was. And knowing its function, that tells you what it was used for. So I'm very particular about that, and I use Chenal's nomenclature, which is what you see over there on that side. And that's what history museums use to classify and categorize the collections. All right, next slide. So let's get into what we have here. We have a lot of jars. As I mentioned, they're not crocks, they're jars. Jars are shaped like this. They're taller than they are wide. They can taper slightly at the top or not at all. They have a thick rim so that if you have a piece of like oilcloth or wax paper, you can tie that as a lid over it. Sometimes they have lids. These ones never did. You can tell which ones had lids. You can see the little indentation inside. And these were used to hold all kinds of things, either for stores to sell dry goods in, then you could use them in your home to store dry goods. They could be large. Some of these are very big. Some of these are very small. Smaller jars could be used to can stuff or store apple butter in. Apple butter jars are very common, made of this stuff. So we have an assortment of sizes, and this is just a broad collection of what we have here. And a few of these pieces, these 2 on the left are made in Alexandria, right around the corner here. And then that red one in the back over on the right, that's from Texas. So it's kind of fun to see these jars as they go down, and that tall one in the middle, that was made in South Carolina. So we have some others, and we're going to see more of these as we go on. Next slide, please. Jugs. We have a few jugs in the collection. This was made in Texas, this first one here, and the second one was made in the Catawba Valley in North Carolina. We have 5 total jugs in the collection, and jugs are defined as these, they have a bulbous body, a small opening that you would stop with a cork or a piece of wood, and they held liquids, water, beverages, things like that. So these ones are very pretty, and they look similar in size, but they're not at all. That one is very big, and this one is just medium-sized. Next slide, please. Pitchers. Oh, this is another jug, sorry. This is my favorite one, my favorite photo I've taken. I forgot, I have a few pictures of jugs here. So this one was probably 1860s to 1870s, and I don't have a location. I can just say that it's from the Mid-Atlantic, just because of its coloring and that sort of thing. So I don't have a proper location. Maybe at some point I'll find something with a similar decoration to this that will help me identify it a little bit more, but for now we can just enjoy my beautiful photo. I don't usually take such great photos, so I'm really milking this one. Next slide, please. I love this jar. So this was made in the early 1800s, 1822 to 1823, and it's marked David Goodale and Absalom Stedman from Hartford, Connecticut. And this is just a really cool little jug. The color is just amazing for Connecticut. So that's the rest of the jugs. Next slide, please. Pitchers. Of course, we always have to have lots of containers for beverages. We only have 3 in the collection. These are all 3 of them. So that's probably something I'll try to acquire more of as time goes by. And these were used in the kitchen for all kinds of things, or taverns, that sort of thing, for serving more tasty beverages, and water, of course, too. Milk even. They're nice because they keep things cold, because stoneware is so solid and it stays cool nicely. And so these are mostly from Eastern. The far right one is from Strasburg, Virginia. And that's a little later, that's 1877, and that's even marked on it. So that's how we know that date. Next slide, please. Butter churns. We have a few butter churns in the collection, which is nice. One of them even has a wheel-turned lid, which is always fun to find, because you know how lids are even today. Lids break for everything. So this one has an intact lid, which was very exciting. And that band along the bottom, that's keeping it together, because it has a pretty substantial crack in it. But we're not churning butter, so we're not worried about that. We're not churning butter in it, so it's just to look pretty now. So we do have 3 of them. A lot of the other lids, these other lids, and a lot of lids were often just made of wood, because that was easy to turn out. This one over here is probably our biggest one that would have made a lot of butter. And it has a really beautiful pattern on it, and also some white paint, because it was probably kept in someone's barn for a while. And it's definitely white paint and not, you know, bird poo, which is often on a lot of these things because people keep them in their barns. Next slide, please. Flasks. Again, we like to have things to put liquids in. And you know, you need a smaller flask. These guys are only like this big. And I'm saying like about 9 inches for those who can't quite tell. This first one is dated December 28th, 1815. And this is probably from New York or Pennsylvania. The second one is around 1815, and it's possibly from Baltimore. And then the third one, it's adorable. It's a little barrel. And that one was made by Joseph Crafts in Massachusetts around 1835. So these are fun kind of whimsical things, but they're also functional, because, you know, if you're out in the field, you take a flask with you and you need your switchel or your water or whatever to hydrate you while you're working. And they were also interesting and attractive. Next slide. Speaking of interesting and attractive, look at these guys. Aren't they adorable? They're very small. They're only about 3 or 4 inches high, and they're shakers, they're casters. And figures, that's another form I really want to add some more to the collection, because they're these whimsical things that people put out because everybody wants to have a little fun and have some adorable little duck, you know, shaken salt in their kitchen. And there's stoneware. You don't too often see little figures like this made of stoneware and with decoration. And they're a little different, and they're really cute. We only have 2, but hopefully in future years we'll have more. Next one, please. The only crock we have in the collection. It's a very nice crock. It probably held butter. Crocks are straight-sided, made for holding butter or lard, and you know, you just need the opening to be big so you can get in and out. And this one's a nice size. It's probably about 12 inches high, and it has a nice decoration on it. It's really well made. It has nice handles to grip, and I would like to get some more crocks, because these were pretty common, and we should have some more. I think we should have more of it all. Next slide, please. This is a clabber bowl, and this is one of the most recent additions to our collection. This was made in the Edgefield district of South Carolina in like the 1840s, 1850s, and this was made for clabbering milk. One of my goals with the collecting is to add more interesting forms, different forms. I'll take jars, you know, I'll definitely take them, but I'd like more interesting things that show what people would have had in their homes. This had a very specific use, though. This bowl was used to clabber milk, and it's just thickened or curdled milk. Now, it's not spoiled milk. Spoiled milk can only come from pasteurized milk that's been pasteurized. And this is then fermented. It uses the lactic acid that's present in the raw milk. And then you can bake with it. It's a leavening agent. Clabbered milk was used for all kinds of stuff. And so it just makes sense to have one here. So I hope to get, I don't know if we need like a lot of clabbering bowls, but you know, when one shows up and someone has a clabbering bowl that they want to give us, we'll consider it. All right, next slide. So now we're going to talk about the different types of glazes and decorations that we have here represented at the DAR Museum. So glazing is sealing the clay so that it's non-porous, so that it's waterproof. And most of our stuff is salt glazed. And these are two great examples of salt glazed stuff. Salt glazed is often compared to an orange peel. It has the texture of an orange peel. And I thought this picture over here on the right can really let you see that it does have kind of an orange peel-like texture to it. So salt glazing was just done by when they were in the kiln firing, salt was thrown into the kiln, and it forms this vitreous seal over the entire surface. Now, in addition to that, they can also be decorated too. As you can see, the other one has decoration on it. So, like I said, most of our stuff is salt glazed. Next slide, please. Another way to glaze them, to make them non-porous, is to ash glaze them. And this was done a lot in the South. These are from the Carolinas. These are from North Carolina. And North Carolina is known for their pine. That's used in the kiln, but they use a harder wood like oak to make the ash that was then used in the kiln to create this type of glaze. And these are the only pieces we have like this. I'd really like to add more because they're always very interesting. And that's the thing with, if you've done any kind of pottery work, it's kind of a mystery sometimes what it's going to come out and look like. And the ash glazing gives them a really neat quality. Next slide, please. Another way, we recognize this guy. Another way to seal them is with an alkaline glaze. And this one has an alkaline glaze, some kind of alkali like potash or soda or baria to create this glass-like coating on it. And they all end up being a glass-like coating, but they're just different ways to get at. And it's based on what resources you have around you. So in the Carolinas, it makes sense to use wood ash because you have a lot of it. All right, next slide. Decorations. So of course, we're going to decorate things. Like we're going to make those beautiful little figures like the ducks. We want things to look nice. And there's a variety of ways of decorating. Stamps up here, the Corlier's hook on our new Thomas Cummerah piece has a stamp. But then you can also, the potters would also hand incise stuff. This is our Dave Drake jar. And he used a sharp tool and incised the date and his name on it. Thomas Cummerah, stamped Corlier's hook, but he hand incised, and this is a very early Thomas Cummerah piece, circa 1797, and he was doing the pottery himself. So this is very likely done in his own hand, which was really exciting to us, why we really wanted this piece for the collection. And then the top one is stamped Charlestown, and that's Massachusetts. And then these lines, these incised lines, and they're just used with a sharp tool, and it just gives it another look. So there were so many ways to decorate pottery in the form of stamps and incising. Next slide. Of course, everyone's familiar with the cobalt blue decorations, and we have some beautiful pieces here. Unfortunately, I don't know anything about that one on the right, but I'm hoping as time goes on and I see more and more pieces, I'll find some other beautiful little bird like that. But they are known for, the potters were known for just these beautiful flourishes, these beautiful decorations on them. And these even have names. This one is from Alexandria, although it's DC here. And they just, they vary from area. You can certainly tell Baltimore pieces from Alexandria pieces. So it's just another way to decorate, but it also helps us identify makers and regions too. And the bulk of our stoneware is decorated like this with these flourishes. And next slide, please. Another way to decorate is with slip glazes. So these are two jars from the Edgefield district of South Carolina, made about 1850. They're both made about 1850, and they're very big jars. They're very big. They're like 20 inches high. The jar on the left is, it comes out reddish brown, but it's an iron slip, so that makes sense. Iron would come out as a reddish brown from the kiln. And the kaolin slip on the right is revealed in white after it's fired. So they're just more ways to decorate. All right, next slide. So I was going through and coming up with all the names. There's supposed to be a list scrolling. There it goes. So these are all the makers and locations that we have now represented in the collection. And it's quite a few. It's quite a few regions. And so as I was going through everything, I was definitely able to see some, well, I guess it's not going to, well, that's pretty anyhow. So I thought it would maybe show up just the list then. Well, you can leave that there, that butter churn. So we had a lot represented, and it was going through it all. It was very nice to see the difference is in appearances based on region and maker and all sorts of things. So how did we get this collection that we have? As I mentioned, we've been collecting it for 100 years. So we have some pretty old stuff that's been in the collection for a long time. Like it wasn't that old when it came into the collection, but I'm glad it did. The first piece of stoneware that was donated to the museum is this butter churn, and it was donated in 1941. And it's just around 1850, Eastern US. I don't have any other information on it, but I hope at some point I'll find some more. So that's the dasher down there, and that's the lid and the dasher. Do we know how butter is made? Okay, so the dasher just churns up the heavy cream, and it like separates the whey from the butter, and then you have butter at the end. So, as I said, most of the stuff that came here were gifts. This is a gift. We had 43 gifts and 6 purchases. So I mentioned at the beginning that we had some very important pieces in the collection, and so now I'll go through those a little bit. Next slide. We have a David Drake jar, which is just fantastic. And we got this at auction in 2007. And there wasn't too much information in its catalog record about it. And so in my research, I was able to find out a lot more about it because it was listed in one of these books here in an article where they cataloged every piece of David Drake pottery that's known as of 2006. And this one was in it. So because of the date on it, we know that it was made at the Lewis Miles Stoneware factory at Stony Bluff Plantation on Big Horse Creek in South Carolina. So it's always great when we can add more information to the catalog record. And this is a beautiful piece, and it's of course on display downstairs, and you can go see that. Next slide, please. And I briefly mentioned this guy, but this is very exciting. We just got this in August. This is the Thomas Cumera jar. He was formerly enslaved, and for decades, people thought he was this French guy because his last name was spelled wrong. It was spelled like Camero. Instead of a W at the end, a U that made it look French. And it wasn't until a researcher discovered his name in a census record that said Thomas Cumera, Black potter, that so much more was revealed about this man. And we have a book here written by that researcher that I used to talk about this. And it's actually, this book is on the cover, or this guy's on the cover of it. So, so it's a cover pot. But we're really excited to get this because this tells like a really important story about early American stoneware. He was a Black businessman in the late 1700s, early 1800s. He was active in the American Colonization Society. He went to the continent of Africa, and it was very bad. And he had to come back with not all his family members because they died. It's a fascinating piece, and this is on display, and please come and see it because it's just an amazing piece, and we're really fortunate to have gotten it. Next slide. Okay, press it again, okay, this is the Texas pottery. I'm gonna have you press it a few more times. That should be it. So these are all of our Texas pieces of stoneware. I had never worked with Texas pottery before. This was really exciting to see this kind of stuff and how similar it is to the South Carolina stuff. And that makes sense because I learned that the potters, and these are stamps, so I know who made them. We know who made them. They learned from the potters in the Edgefield district, and they just kept going further south into Texas and started making pottery there. So that you can see the similarities between the pottery makers. And that's always, like I said, that's interesting to see patterns. So I hope we can add more of the Texas pottery to the collection because it definitely helps fill out the larger story of stoneware, because this is being made much later in the 1800s, and as it's dying out in other places because other things are coming into use. So that's really interesting. Next slide. All right, so this is where I come to the end and I tell you that more about my collecting plan and how I've already added some pieces to the collection I'm really excited about, and I want to continue adding more to them. Acquiring the Kamara piece earlier was just fantastic for our collection. And I would like to acquire more pieces for the collection of other famous makers so that we can compare and contrast them. For instance, Baltimore, we could have some more pieces from Baltimore or Philadelphia. And as I mentioned before, forms are really important. We have a lot of jars, but I'd like to get some other types of styles, like the clabber bowl. And then themes, I'd like to collect on based on themes, like dairying has revealed itself in our collection. We have butter churns, a butter crock, the clabber bowl now, and there's other, I'd love to get a milk pan, a separating pan that separates the cream made of stoneware. And stoneware is great for that because it stays cooled for a while. So this, as I mentioned, this was an overview of what we have, and it's what I learned while I cataloged the entire collection at once, which was just a great opportunity. And I didn't talk in detail about the individual pieces, but you can always find more information about these pieces in our online database collections.dar.org. And if you go there, you can search for stoneware and find more pieces. Also, if you're here, please stop in the study gallery and have a look at what we have down there. And some of these things are going to be in upcoming exhibits, and so keep an eye out for them in exhibits. Next slide. One more slide, because my next step is the redware, and I'm very excited about the redware. I was excited about the stoneware, but so I'm going to be working on the redware, and so you can expect a similar type of talk next year on the redware. The banner was supposed to wave. There we go. So these are terrible photos. I'll take new ones. I took those too, but. So that's what I have for you guys. Can I answer any questions about my process? Yes.
Wonderful question.
Thank you.
Thank you. I'm just wondering, was stoneware the most commonly used form of, all the different things you showed from the time the country was founded until the late, I think you said the late 1880s, and until why?
Repeat the question.
So I'm going to repeat the question for the people online. I was asked, was stoneware the most common material used in household goods from the founding of the country into the late 19th century? No, there was a variety of things used. There was cast iron. The redware was very common in more backcountry places because it wasn't as hard to fire as stoneware. But in cities, stoneware was very common because they had the technology. It required a different type of technology to make it. And so there were a variety of materials, wood for pitchers and things like that also. So there was a large variety of materials that were used. But as far between redware and stoneware into the late 19th century, if you go into rural Pennsylvania, redware was still being used very late. Stoneware replaced a lot of redware in places because it was more durable. It was, the glazes were better and safer for you to use. So stoneware was preferred, but in some places they were still making redware because that's the technology they had. Does that answer it?
Okay. So what was next?
What was next? A lot of cast iron, because then we were getting into stoves and bigger ranges and stuff like that. And you couldn't really cook with these kinds of things on them. Somewhere where you could, but not once we got into the stoves. Glass as more manufacturers, and then things coming overseas. We were always going to have a lot of stuff coming overseas, like finer porcelain and glass and things like that. So, no. All right. Well, thank you guys so much. Everybody online, thank you for tuning in. I hope you can make it here. Thank you. And you're welcome to come up and have a look at these books if you're interested. What? Well, the material was easy to come by, and it was very striking against the, yeah. So it was easy to come by, easy to put on.